Welcome back. Brett Kelly always did well at school and in sport. And at 22, he'd already cracked a good job in merchant banking. But then his dream run ended. He was laid off, told by his boss that his work wasn't good enough, that he didn't fit in with other people. Now that setback spurred Brett Kelly to try to find out the secrets of success from people who are successful. Well, after thousands of phone calls and scores of interviews, here's the result, a book called Collective Wisdom. Brett Kelly overcame all the doubters to write it and to publish it himself. Howard Gibbs has his story.
To sit opposite H.G. Nelson, well, what can I say? I went home with sore cheeks from laughing too hard. And he offers you some real insights. If going hard often and early isn't the best advice I could give to anyone, well, it's the best advice I've had. It was super.
H.G. Nelson isn't the only one to leave a lasting impression on this determined youngster. Brett Kelly's brush with unemployment has a fairy tale twist, which took him round the country to interview some of our famous faces.
Jeff was amazing because, on the day that he saw me, it was in the papers that he'd broken up with his wife. Now, for him to still sit down for an hour with me, who's, no one from nowhere, I thought was incredible.
Well, I guess that's being winter and it'll be interesting.
Poppy's amazing because one of the big problems I had is, Brett, you're too young to be doing what you're doing. Well, you go and meet Poppy King and you sit there and you think, well, she's too young to be that together, that smart and that successful. That really helped me get over the too young issue.
H.G. Nelson, Jeff Kennett, Poppy King. Just 3 of the 34 special interviews Brett collected after 3,000 phone calls and 6 months' work. So what would drive a 22-year-old to such lengths?
I got sacked. It's as simple as that. And I didn't know what to do. So I thought if I met some people who'd done some things I might want to do, and I don't know, I just thought I could learn a thing or two.
And he reckons he did, but he must have something going for him to persuade them to give him the time of day.
I thought that in being a young person, deciding to sort of get off the ground and do something like this and approach some very prominent Australians about getting involved showed a lot of initiative.
I think it showed great imagination, a fair degree of persistence, and also, a lot of thoughtfulness in the kinds of questions.
Malcolm was a little bit reticent to answer some of the questions, so it was very challenging.
So were they surprised when this 22-year-old unemployed person comes along and says, I want a couple of hours of your time?
Yeah, surprise the word. They sort of said, well, okay, but what makes you think you can write a book?
Brett saw that the book would be an uphill battle, but he wasn't going to give up.
When you're 22, you're unemployed, you've got no experience, no publisher, well then what track record do you have to suggest that you can make a book happen? And that's really what I came up against. They were like, we get asked all the time, can you tell us it's going to end up in a book? And I said, well, I'll give you my word.
He managed to persuade 7 sponsors to lend him $21,000 to publish Collective Wisdom, and he met people along the way who cut their costs to make it happen. There you are, standing in the bookshop looking at your book in the new releases section. How do you feel?
Howard, it's incredible because I walked into a bookshop and saw a book that was very similar to this. And I saw it right at the beginning when people were calling me, stupid, an idiot, what the hell do you think you're doing, those sorts of things. I saw that book and said, one day I'm going to see my book, like that book, on the shelf. I've heard it said anyone can, publish a book, but not everyone can sell a book.
Howard Gibbs there with a very determined young bloke. And Collective Wisdom is in the bookshops right now. It's a good read, especially for your children.
Earlier this week, Julia Zayata, our esteemed editor-in-chief of Family Circle magazine, caught up with former PM Bob Hawke. Brett Kelly made it possible as the author of a new book full of interviews with prominent Australians called Collective Wisdom. They both sat down in Mr Hawke's office to muse about the big issues.
Thank you both for talking to us, Mr Hawke and Brett Kelly. You put together a wonderful book called Collective Wisdom, and the title I'm sure will roll off people's tongue without thinking about it enough, but it's such a lovely concept. It's a very unusual way how you came to put this book together. Can you tell us quickly how you did that?
Yeah, Julia, I lost my job and I didn't know what to do, so I read a couple of books and I talked to meeting people that had done some things you might want to do, and just finding out what is it made difference to them, and that's really what the idea was.
Now, the turning around point for you talking to people was Mr. Hawke kindly agreed to speak to you. What your extraordinarily busy schedule, what made you decide that you'd give Brett Kelly time when you didn't know who he was or whether his book's going to come to pass?
I like his imagination. It was something quite different, and I've always tried to go out of the way, even at busy times of my life, to associate with young people, like to visit schools, and I get a lot of requests from people who are doing projects, and I try to fit them all in, and I just thought of this young bloke that he had a bit of chutzpah, and when he turned up and saw it, he confirmed that. I think he's to be congratulated.
Now, when you were talking to Mr. Hawke, you must have thought he was one of the most inspirational people of all the ones you spoke to. What did you get out of spending time with him?
Julia, it was very different because I only got a small group of about 12 people at a time,
Yeah.
and they weren't people, you know, were going to jump their chairs about. But then Mr. Hawke agreed to do it, and it encouraged me to really keep going. I'd gone about a month without being able to get anyone, and I then had a sort of new confidence, started pushing a little bit harder.
There's a couple of things that you said, if I might ask you about in the book. You said that when you came to government in 1983, we were unsure of one another as a country, unsure of ourselves, unsure of our place in the world. And it's a very confrontational society. What do you think about us at the moment?
I've never been more disturbed about the condition of Australia and where it's going. You have a situation where Pauline Hanson and One Nation has injected into our thinking in this country and has made acceptable to too many people the concept some people are second-class human beings either because of their colour or their creed or the length of time they've been amongst us. If you've been here 20 years, you're better than if you've only been here 2 years. You're a better Australian. And this concept of dividing people, putting people down because of their colour or the fact that they're immigrants, is something that I find absolutely appalling. Morally, it's objectionable, and economically, it's insane, because the truth is that Australia's future is with Asia. More than 60% of our exports go there, and while Asia's done at the moment, it will recover and become important. Our tourism industry, which is the fastest growing source of employment for our young people. More than 50% of our overseas tourists come from Asia. And our education system, we have more than 130,000 Asian students here in our various educational institutions, which is marvellous for building future relations. They're also a great export earner. Now, the simple fact is that if you give Asians the impression we don't like them, not welcome, or think they're second-class human beings, they have other places to invest their money. They have other places to send their children to be educated. They have alternative sources for their imports. And so, as I say, it's not only to be morally objectionable that you differentiate human beings because of their colour or race, but also economically absurd.
So how would you advise Australians to think at the moment to make a cohesive country again?
Well, you've got to tell people the facts. I mean, people are worried and insecure because we live in a time of the most rapid change in the whole of history. People don't have the same sense of security that they used to have. Now, you've got to explain to people that in some sense this is happening because we're getting smarter. We can produce things more efficiently. We can provide service more efficiently than we used to. Now, should we be upset about the fact that as human beings we're getting smart? No. What we should be doing is saying we're smart technologically. We should be starting to get as smart sociologically, so that we face up to the fact that our genius in science and technology is giving us opportunity for a better way of life, better standard, better quality of life. Some people are going to be adversely impacted immediately by those changes. So, as a society, we have to help those people who are impacted. We do that by retraining, training or retraining, relocation allowances, keeping in the education system long, so that what can be good for society is not signed off to say the majority with a minority being disadvantaged, but a spread. Now, if we explain the facts of life and that the simplistic propositions of Hanson, who seems that we can hop off the world, just hop off, put a fence on ourselves, this is a bloody nonsense. It is not only a nonsense, but it's going to be self-defeating. I mean, in Queensland already, Mrs Hanson's impact has been create less job opportunities for young people in Queensland because people are not investing there. People are going to send their kids there. They're sending elsewhere. Now, what a great contribution that is. So it's not a question of abusing Mrs Hanson or getting in personal vilification. It's a question of just putting a fact out, showing how self-defeating as well as immoral it is to carry on this way.
It's interesting that you bring up humans being smart, because it was the last thing that I want to ask you that I note here. You put that down, you put it down in a technological sense that humans are getting smarter, and that what you said, some will benefit in different ways as a result of that. And that humankind is getting smart, making things and producing services. Are we getting happy, Mr Hawke? Are we spiritually more satisfied?
Well, we'll come to the spiritual side in a minute. I can tell you, I just went to the dentist the other day.
Yeah.
And I remember going to the dentist as a kid. And my God, I'm happier today. I'm happier today because of the marvellous increase in technology. It doesn't scare the big bases out of me.
Yeah.
And it used to be absolute hell. If you look at people, let's talk about labourers. Isn't it better that they have forklift trucks now? Stack and pile of goods than finishing up broken back. Do you want to go back? Do you want to say we're going to put a moratorium on human genius technology? Of course we're better off.
Are we more fulfilled as people in? Are we more fulfilled?
Well, those who are getting the benefits without the pain,
Yes.
I would think, no question, happen. As though, I've put it forward, as though we've had a collective lobotomy. And one side of the brain is just bursting ahead with genius, but the sociological side, the social engineering side, hasn't kept pace. We've got to be prepared to rethink so that we take advantage of our genius and make sure that people don't suffer.
Thank you both very much for your time. It's been very good talking to you.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
That was terrific. That Brett Kelly's a pretty extraordinary guy, isn't he?
Is he in that great incentive to go out and do a book?
Yeah, I mean, he published it himself, didn't he?
He did. It's available in bookshops right now, but if you can't get it in bookshops, there's an address coming up on screen in a moment.
It's Clown Publishing, I think.
It's Collective Wisdom, yes, from Clown Publishing, P.O. Box 60, Enfield, New South Wales 21336. Get a copy. It's a terrific read.
I think it's tremendous, and it's a credit to him. Credit to him.
What about Bob Hawke?
Indeed.
Yes.
Now, for all the latest stories all around the nation, it's time to cross to Channel 2 News Centre.
Not only Collective Wisdom, a terrific book, but also the background to how it came to be is a great story too. Brett Kelly is the man responsible. Welcome him to GMA. Good morning, Brett. Well, I suppose persistence and perseverance, the two pieces would have been pretty important in getting this together.
Without doubt, but I made over 3,000 phone calls and sent almost 500 letters in a period of about 5 months. So that was what made the day for me, just continually calling back.
You've got 34 interviews there. All those phone calls that you've mentioned already. Any knockbacks from prominent people that support you?
I think to ever get a knockback disappoints anyone, but to get 34 of Australia's most prominent, busy and interesting people to talk to you, out of just 80 that I approached, I thought that was fantastic. And this was, one-on-one, face-to-face. It wasn't just ringing up and asking to talk to them. So
had to meet them.
I really wanted to meet them.
Okay, we've chosen a couple. Hawke, what were your preconceptions about him, and what was the reality when you got with him?
Well, as Prime Minister, he seemed to come across as a good bloke. And then I turned up to interview him, and he was a bloke. He sat down for 3.5 hours and just talked to us, gave me an hour for the interview, and then just, smoked a cigar and talked to me about the world. It was really amazing.
So what was that up? You took a tape recorder to the...
I had this little dictaphone machine, and I just sort of put that on the desk and had my questions written down and asked the questions.
How much editing did you do?
We did a little bit. I had a great professional editor to help me. I edited them and spell-checked them, and then she edited them. But then we sent them back as the contributors, said, look, if it doesn't represent your view, can you change it for us? And they did, so...
Were there any requests to change something?
There were slight changes, more grammatical to some people than anything, and up to the Republican convention, there were some changes in position there.
Peter Harris.
Amazing. Peter was great in the sense I had 12 interviews and requested. He said, in principle, no problem. And I went back and back and back. He said, if you'll follow through, I'll do it. So when I had 25 people, I saw him singing on a sidewalk, and I thought it must be time. Rang his personal assistant and said, yep, no problem, come in. It was incredible.
And what was that like, the experience of meeting and being with him?
Well, he spent a good amount of time with me and really showed me some different views of the world. His opinion about the value of the environment as an economic resource, even if you like looking at it, really insightful.
Anyone that said yes, and then you went and got the interview with it, you got the feeling they were giving you the flick or wanted to give you a flick?
No, there were some people who've come and said, no, that's fantastic, great book, we never thought it would happen. So that was very satisfying. But the whole time they were engaging, were even prepared to sort of take the punt and give me their time.
Jeff Kennett?
It was amazing. To have him sit down and talk to me for an hour on the day it was announced in the paper that he'd broken up with his wife, well, that meant a lot to me.
The same day?
Yeah. So
how did you approach that? For a number of things.
No, I said nothing. I said nothing about it because it wasn't there. It wasn't what I was to talk about. So imagine a guy doing that.
And how long did you get for an hour? Did you say?
Yeah, an hour. The next day in the paper they had a list of his schedule for that day, and they'd accounted for every hour except the hour I got, so that was pretty incredible.
What hour was this, matter of interest?
About 11 till 12, I think it was.
Right. Can I just ask you finally, who's not there that you would like to have for the second book? Because obviously, if I need Joe, there's a second book.
Yeah, I think to meet at home court, I think she's an amazing woman. It would be fantastic. Obviously, distance, and she's extremely busy. It'd be great to meet her. I think Rupert Murdoch's an interesting person as well.
How old are you?
I'm 23 now.
It's a terrific start to what you want to have a career in journalism and writing?
I don't want to just do anything in one area, but I'd like to write books and other things as well, yeah.
Terrific. Well, congratulations on that. It's called Collective Wisdom. It's by Brett Kelly. We've met that this morning, and he's done a terrific job, and I recommend the book too. Thanks a lot, Brett. Good luck for you.
National Press Club Australian Democrat Senator Natasha Stott Spoyer launching book Collective Wisdom by Brett Kelly. It's the result of interviews with 34 prominent achievers who offer their insight into issues affecting young Australians. Natasha Stotter and Brett Kelly with today's National Press Club address.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's National Press Club Telstra address. We're very pleased to welcome Senator Natasha Stotter and Brett Kelly. As you've just heard, Brett has written a book derived from called The Collective Wisdom, and it is the distillation of the thought of those Australians he called upon. One of the being Senator Dr. Sawyer. She's not actually launching books, she's here to really talk about some of the issues it raises and some of the policies that affect young people who are the focus of most of this work. I'll call upon her to speak to you first, and you'll have the chance to ask her questions afterwards, but between her address to you and question time, you'll hear from the author. But first of all, let's welcome Senator Dr. Sawyer.
Thank you, Ken. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I begin by acknowledging the Ngunnawal people, traditional owners of this land. And as Peter Garrett says in Collective Wisdom, all the land here, with some exception, was taken illegally by settlers when they arrived. It wasn't lawfully taken from Aboriginal people, it was illegally taken. Well, it's an honour to speak at the launch of Brett Kelly's book today. Collective Wisdom is about having an idea and making it happen. Brett shares with us the wide-ranging views of 34 Australians. They tell us who or what influenced their lives and talk about their views on issues like republicanism, tax reform, drugs, euthanasia, education, employment and racism. From Professor Gavin Brown's belief that education is about the excitement of ideas and respect for them, to Lindsay Fox's comment that money is a byproduct of job satisfaction. We all have people in public life that we admire. We usually only get glimpses of what lies behind public face. We wonder what is the drive, a direction that propelled them in their accomplishment. I'm particularly pleased to be a part of this launch today because it is a successful youth story. And if it were not for soapy stars or sports stars, there would be few positive images of young people in our newspapers or on our televisions. The easiest way, in fact, for a young person to get coverage in the mainstream media is for them to commit crime. And as the federal election campaign begins, we can expect to hear about the youth crime wave and policies to seek criminalising young people, excluding them from public spaces with curfews, move-on laws and sweep operations. It makes you wonder, what is public space for? And aren't young people members of the public? In fact, the way that we manage young people in public spaces has been described as spatial apartheid. This spatial apartheid also exists in some sections of media. Here's a report from the mainstream shock jocks. A story about youth employment accompanied by a picture of young people at the beach. If only they were trying harder. Generation X, a lost generation. Slackers, drugs are young people. Doll blushers are lost youth. A story no parent can afford to miss, indeed. The youth dilemma is blamed on lack of morals, laziness, latchkey legacy and even a lack of war. But young people need a chance to be part of sculpting the landscape, not just as a topic of debate, if they were some distant problem to be talked about but not listened to. Not to allow young Australians a forum in which to express themselves or to allow them to be seen and heard is a big mistake. When was the last time, other than perhaps in Triple J, that you heard a discussion about teenage sexuality, drugs, piercings, skateboarding and blading, graffiti, political demonstrations that wasn't a thinly disguised cover for how can we stop the little delinquents from doing that? Recently, we've seen extraordinary vilification of young people involved in peaceful protest. Now, young people and students have a long history of taking to the streets, often representing cutting-edge political action. We often view with nostalgia the involvement in Vietnam moratoriums, 1968 student demonstrations in France, or Tiananmen Square. But when it are young people, they're described as ignorant, manipulated and delinquent. Dr. Tato Shane, in Collective Wisdom, says, "It seems to me, as a society, we do our level best to alienate our youth." Well, in the last 20 years, we have seen an erosion in the environment in which young people inhabit. Young people are increasingly excluded from society's centre. Now, we can speak of the transition to adulthood. This transition, adolescence, is actually quite a modern concept. In most previous societies, a specific ceremony marked the change from child to adulthood. In modern society, however, growing up has been extended. We're marrying later, we're having children later, we're in education longer, we begin paid work later. Many people have their first drink or their first puff before their first job. The responsibilities and benefits of becoming a full functioning member of our community are being delayed for longer and longer. But there are also specific and intentional government policies which seek to delay recognition of young people as people, not just as beneficiaries of the family and dreams of the state. Youth unemployment in Australia is now 29.9%. Now, a number of those people in Collective Wisdom say there is no acceptable level of unemployment. Some suggest an acceptable level would be around 3%. So we're still talking a rate of almost 10 times that. We've now had shamefully high levels of youth unemployment in this country for over a decade. This had a dramatic impact on young people's views of themselves, their potential and their role in Australian society. I want to address just how unprecedented the circumstances facing young people today really are. In 1922, teenage unemployment, the rate was actually lower than the unemployment rate for adults. Indeed, even in 1931, one of the worst years of the Depression, teenage unemployment rate in Australia was around 20%. 40 years ago, teenage unemployment was almost non-existent. In fact, in 1947, more than 70% of 15 to 19-year-olds were in the workforce. Today, it's around 17%. Most politicians, when they were young, faced unemployment levels of around 3%. All the young people of today that, especially you're a politician, and they won't believe you. For the last election, the Prime Minister, in the second televised debate, said in part, "I've developed a plan for youth employment. I will actually do something about it. I will ensure that there is some hope offered to those young Australians without a job." Well, a year later, in fact the week that the Work for the Dollar scheme was announced, there was the Prime Minister in one newspaper saying, "You owe us." The Prime Minister was here yesterday, defending the $10 million that will be spent on advertising at GSE. And the Treasurer, Peter Costello, will be here on Friday, talking about the 1997-98 budget, coming in at a miraculous $2.3 billion ahead forecasts. But this government has replaced the deficit, a budget deficit, with a social deficit. In fact, in this government's first budget, nearly all the money came from hitting young people with cut to programs and high fees and charges. The last budget contained no measures for job creation and slashed further $147.6 million from the provision of employment services under Job Network. Work for the Dollar was extended and young employed people were restricted in places in which they can live. The budget did make a tax deduction on buying a new suit for your first day of work. Though for those who don't get jobs, or as the Youth Affairs Council of South Australia has said, if you're over 65 and if you have the flu, it was an okay budget. Yearly costs of youth unemployment to the nation are around $6 to $7 billion per annum. The social costs, of course, to generation are immeasurable. But rather than finding solutions to youth unemployment, or at least recognising that in some circumstances it's beyond young people's control, many young people are then blamed for being unemployed. In Collective Wisdom, Hugh Mackay says, "We're going through a period of blaming unemployed people for being unemployed. Get a haircut, get a job. They're blamed on graffiti and piercing and grunge, public schools and migrants, and that's saying, well, why don't you just get a job at McDonald's? Well, I'm sorry, there just aren't enough rides to go around." The answers? Keep Dole Diary, Job in a Gold Blood Hotline, Work for the Dole, and Common Youth Allowance, all programs targeted at young people. And all of these sending these messages that young people are something to be scared of, they may be untrustworthy, that they need to be coerced into work or education. Well, there are extraordinary changes taking place in the area of income support with the introduction of Common Youth Allowance. Now, the greatest danger of the CYA is that those who are unable to participate in educational training for various reasons, those who are already marginalised in multiple ways, will be forced over the edge of the system. The same government has brought you increased HECT, upfront university fees and savage cuts to university and school funding, now requires young people to stay at school until they complete Year 12 in order to be eligible for income support. Schools with inadequate funding will be forced to cater to students who don't want to be there. So the Common Youth Allowance is an attempt to reduce artificially the teenage unemployment statistics by directing young people into education places without changing the reality that a lot of these young people are seeking work and the independence that